Derek.
And I'm Noah. And you're listening to A Bite of.
Wait, what? Where we take our current favorite pop culture obsession and enjoy it one nibble at a time.
I guess.
Sorry, we practiced and we just haven't done it in a while officially.
Yeah, it's been a minute because we had to wait for Bly Manor to come out to continue doing this season.
Correct. And also because I had back surgery.
Oh, yeah, that. Yeah.
So if you saw on our social media, probably about 3 weeks ago, a little more than 3 weeks ago, I was recording laying down on a couch because I had a herniated disc that was wrecking my sciatic nerve. So I couldn't sit, I couldn't stand. So it was fun times recording. But I had surgery about 3 weeks ago and I'm on the mend.
You're able to sit now.
I'm sitting now.
We're recording how we normally record, and this is fantastic.
Yeah.
So big round of applause for
Yay!
Derek.
I feel like a whole new person. It's quite nice. So obviously I have not done that introduction, even though we ran through it yesterday on a walk, and it was perfect on the walk.
Yeah, you're like, do I remember it? And then you said it. I was like, yeah, it's fine. You got it. And
I think I got too hyped by the music and also the cold brew is kicking in.
Yeah. Yeah. Cold brew is a much needed thing, especially when we do this early in the morning, talking about spooky things.
Yes. Yes. And so let's just quickly talk about the last 3 episodes of season 2. So we read the novella, The Turn of the Screw, which The Haunting of Bly Manor is based on. And I'm actually really happy that we did that because in watching the first episode, you saw little nods to that.
Yes.
And I truly appreciated that.
I mean, right off the bat, and I just want to say, because we're going to go over the history of, Mike Flanagan a little bit and stuff, but I do want to say that I'm glad that we knew the bits and pieces from the story, and I'm glad that they expanded on them, like gave the governess a name.
That's nice. It's just a touch. It just helps you to know the main character just a little more.
It's like, oh, it's a person. It's an actual person.
Yeah, it's not just some floating psychotic title running through a house.
Yeah.
So that's really what we did in the first 3 episodes of this season. And I think the book itself started off really strong, and then we got kind of lost a little bit of
became too ambiguous.
Yeah.
It became too much you choose your own adventure to see what you think this is. And it's interesting because a couple of people on social media or things that I've seen that people have posted about it after listening to us, either people agreed with Derek or agreed with myself or agreed with both of us. And they're like, no, she is crazy. And there was also a ghost. And I'm like, that's too much.
Double whammy. There was a ghost, but she did also smother Miles to death.
Right. Yeah.
You know what? I like a little medium there. That's nice. Not one way or the other.
Yeah.
So now that we did that, let's talk a little bit about The Haunting of Hill House and Mike Flanagan. So Noah had actually watched The Haunting of Hill House before I did.
Yes.
And we were looking for something to sort of binge during quarantine. And what makes you feel better about a worldwide pandemic than watching a haunted house with family history that's pretty demonic in some way?
I mean, the good thing was it wasn't it's not cheap jump scares.
No.
So it's very much heavy family spooky drama with lots of death.
Lots of death. Lots of surprises, though, in the storyline. So when we watched it, I have no idea why I had put it off for so long, because like we've said before, this is my type of horror. I love this stuff.
I was surprised when you hadn't seen it.
Yeah. And so Noah rewatched the whole thing with me, and he had to sort of control me because I was ready to be like, all right, well, we're watching it all in one night because I'm completely obsessed with this and I love it. And I'm the type of person that when I love something, I go deep into it. I'm all about it. So I had actually contrary to, I think, popular opinion, I really love the 1999 movie, The Haunting. I have too much cold brew happening right now. I think I should have had a Clementine or something. So I really liked the 1999 film, The Haunting.
With Catherine Zeta-Jones?
Owen Wilson, Liam Neeson, Lily Taylor, which is based probably more on the book.
Yeah,
then I would say there's a doctor and the characters are these people coming in for an experiment. So that's another thing, right? So I loved that. I watched The Haunting of Hill House, and then I was like, well, I have to read the book by Shirley Jackson. I read the book. I got it from the library and on my e-reader, on my Kindle. So I didn't go out into the world during quarantine. Don't worry. And I was like, this was not scary at all.
The book.
The book.
Right.
But I think, in the 60s, I think there was a different sort of feeling of what was scary.
It's more atmospheric, I feel like, and more mystery.
Yes, 100%. Right. And then Noah and I watched the film from 63, The Haunting.
God.
Which was like the most like dramatic thing ever.
I loved it because it was so dramatic.
It was so dramatic.
It was a lot of close-ups and then the woman like spinning around and looking like terrified when nothing was happening.
No, nothing was happening. But that's what the book was like. So there's this one part in the book that they did in the movie from the 60s where she's like on like a little like balcony, let's say, and she looks up looking up at the house and gets dizzy and almost falls off. And everybody's like, no! Right. And that's it. And then they go, there's like a late night and they're in a room and the door's closed. And it's just them in a room and all of these noises happening outside of the room. Mm-hmm. But that's it. You don't see what's making the noises. And so it's just like...
I mean, like if I put myself in those shoes, yes, that would be terrifying. And also, many times have I bent down and lifted my head up really fast and almost fell down.
I think that happened last night.
Yeah, it did happen last night. So, like, it's terrifying, but come on.
Yeah. So I agree. It was kind of like, I was like, oh, but then I just keep telling myself, okay, this is the source material. This is when it was written. So chill out. Chill out, Derek. Mm-hmm. And then like I said, I like the one from 1999. And then we have the new one from The Haunting of Hill House came out in 19 or 18?
18.
18.
No, 19.
19?
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as we said in previous episodes, they literally like took the names like Nell and Luke and
it was a loose adaptation.
And Theo, and that's pretty much it.
Right.
But I mean, putting all that aside, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I completely devoured it with Noah, and I was so excited for Bly Manor. And I was lucky that I watched it later because then I didn't have to wait as long as everybody else. Mm-hmm. So just both of these, so both The Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor are created by Mike Flanagan.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike,
this dude's work.
So I only know these two. Actually, I know one other thing that he did because of you again. So just one of Noah's favorite holidays, if not his favorite holiday, is Halloween.
Yes.
Yeah. And so what Noah likes to do on Halloween is very Halloween-y things. He likes to carve pumpkins and make creepy food and watch horror movies. Mm-hmm. And so
I'm still trying to get Derek to let me cook lingua, which is cow tongue, but he doesn't eat beef. So, I mean... Well,
yeah, that's also one part of it. And another part of it is that I'm very much not a mind over matter person. So once you tell me that it's tongue, that's all I'm going to be thinking about.
I mean, I would just cook it and then shred it up and you'd never know.
I almost barfed. I was just going to, whatever. So Mike Flanagan was born in the United States in Salem, Massachusetts, and he was part of a Coast Guard family, so they moved around a lot. Mm-hmm. They finally settled in Baltimore, in Maryland. And all through his childhood, he was making films with his family and his friends. Like, it was something that he always loved to do.
He's the making of a new Spielberg.
Indeed. So he always had his trusty camera with him and was shooting things. And so when he moved to Baltimore, he did a lot of television production for Discovery and ESPN. And then he wrote and directed an award-winning feature film, Ghosts of Hamilton Street. Mm-hmm. And then after that, he made another movie called Chainsaw Sally. Mm-hmm. And then once that was released, he's like, I'm done with Baltimore. I'm going to LA. I'm really going to like kind of go for Hollywood.
Good.
And he did. And he kind of blew up when he was there. And then in 2005 was when he really entered horror, and he made Oculus. I think which we've both have seen.
Yeah, I like it. It has very much like Mike Flanagan's like, I guess trademarks, where it's a very strong female lead.
Yeah.
Somebody has like some type of like supernatural sensitive ability, and it's very much more atmospheric mm-hmm. and not jump scary.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Which I can appreciate, mm-hmm. which I like. Mm-hmm. And then in 2016 is when he did Hush.
I love that movie.
Yeah. So that's the first piece of Mike Flanagan goodness that you had actually introduced me to on Halloween.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and has the actress that plays Theo.
Right, Kate Siegel.
Kate Siegel.
Yeah, who I just found out he's married to.
Yeah.
In real life.
I wonder how they met. Did they meet on Hush?
I don't know.
I hope so. That's really cute.
Yeah, and they have a son together. Mm-hmm. And then he did The Haunting of Hill House, and now The Haunting of Bly Manor. Mm-hmm. And that's what brings us to our 4th episode of season 2.
Yeah,
of
we
A
just
Bite Of.
wanted to give you a little tiny nibble of who Mike Flanagan is in case you didn't know, because I feel like a lot of people know the name or know the people that do these projects, but I think it's always fun to know more about them and what they did. Like how they got
Absolutely.
there,
Yeah,
you know?
who the creator is, maybe where their mind is, what their background is, and he's done horror before and he does it well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, obviously. He's
yeah.
done it really
now that he has a Netflix series with a 2nd season. So, of course, as always, just a small spoiler alert.
Yeah.
And so what's hard for us now is that we're actually watching these one by one and recording after we watch it. So now that it's all been released on Netflix, it's so hard for us to avoid our own spoilers.
This is one of the first times where I'm having to stop myself from binging a Netflix thing. And I think that's just like the culture we're in now, where it's like, oh, it's all here. I can just sit here for 8-9 hours and
It's a beautiful thing.
Right. And now I'm like, okay, you have to watch it and then talk about it, which is fine. But
because the lovely thing is like, I'm a put this on. I'm a DoorDash. I'm gonna have some chips,
rum and cokes,
rum and cokies. So yeah, we had to really avoid that. Although we did have Chinese, we did order Chinese food last night
and have rum and cokes.
But we only watched one.
Yeah,
it was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So let us get into A Bite Of: The Haunting of Bly Manor,
Episode 1, The Great Good Place.
Indeed.
Love the title. Mm-hmm. Love it. So right off the bat, there's big differences from the book. So if you listen to our previous leading up to this with the turn of the screw, we see Dani, which is the governess.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's different right off the bat. She has a name. But also the narrator's different.
Yeah.
So in the book, so this is where it gets a little weird and confusing. So Douglas is reading the story that the governess wrote.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, it's Carla. How do you say her last name again?
Cugino.
Yeah. And she's being the narrator at like a wedding, like a rehearsal dinner.
Oh, yeah. So Carla Cugino.
Right.
Right. She has like, they put like a little gray streaks in her hair. Mm-hmm. Right. So she doesn't have like that long hair like in the first season. She's like short hair. She waltzes in. She said long sleeve gray shirt underneath a forest green romper. She said, get a load of me. She arrives late to the rehearsal dinner and no one says anything.
Right.
Because it's Carla Cugino.
Mm-hmm.
Right. She sits down.
But they give her weird looks.
They do. So there's like this mysterious air about her, right? Mm-hmm. Like, who is she? And we don't even know who she is. Like on IMDb, the name of the character is narrator.
Right. Yeah. And the interesting thing is when you first meet her, she has like every vessel that could hold water is filled up. It's filled up. The bathtub is filled up. The sink is filled up. And she's having this narration. It's almost like a poem. And she's talking about something. And then she's obviously in a hotel because she's there for the rehearsal dinner. And then that's when she gets there. And the guy that's speaking, he doesn't have a name yet. He looks at her like he knows who she is, but why are you here type of thing? Or like, oh, I didn't expect you to be here.
But there was a space for her at the table.
Right.
There was an empty chair that she just slid into.
Yeah. And just like the book, they start telling these spooky stories
around
or whatever.
The fire.
Right. The wedding couple is like, oh, where we're honeymooning, there's supposedly somebody died. And then, Carla comes in there, the narrator, and she was like, oh, you want to hear a scary story? The turn of the screw.
Bam.
Two kids, terrifying.
Bam.
Sit down, strap in. I got a story for you.
Everybody's like leaning in. They're like, we don't care there's a wedding tomorrow. We want to hear this story. Right. And when she dropped the turn of the screw, I literally I was like, yes. I loved it. I was like, give me that callback. Give me that exact line from the novella. It was like, yes. She also has a British accent.
Yes.
She's also doing an accent, which I think we need to talk about later.
Why not talk about it now?
You want to talk about the accents now?
I mean, she has a fine accent.
Yeah, okay, but I have questions about the accents of everyone.
I don't know, and I should have known this before we did this episode, who is actually British and who is not.
I looked it up.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool. Okay, so then we'll get into that later.
Okay. Yeah. So I made sure I did my research. So she starts to tell the story, and then that's when we meet Dani. And we meet Dani, who's played by Victoria Pedretti, who played Nell.
Oh, amazing
in the
actress.
first season. Yes. So, and Noah and I are like over the moon about her. We were just so blown away by her performance in The Haunting of Hill House. I mean,
and she wasn't in it that much until the end. And every time she was in it, even just being the pet neck lady or being terrified or being sad, it's just her performance is so like consuming.
Oh my God, 100%. Like she really lets the emotions take her over. I love it.
Those like scenes in the first one where she had that sleep paralysis.
Yes.
I just like every time I was like, this is terrifying. And she is selling me on it.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
She's so amazing. And so I had never seen her in anything before The Haunting of Hill House.
This is like her first big break.
Oh, and I'm so excited she got to be the lead in this. So we see her and she's on an interview with the uncle, Henry Wingrave, played by Henry Thomas, who played the father, like the past father.
The young father
in The Haunting of Hill House. And they're having an interview and he's being like very sort of...
off-puttish, but also vague.
Very vague, exactly. And so he's like, why would you want to apply for this? A young girl in London, what are you doing here? And she's
like, do you want to throw your life away when you're so young? Yeah, because she's applying for a job and he's interviewing her. And it's like, I hate questions like that. I've been through interviews where it's like, why do you want to work here? It's like, I need a job.
Right. Yeah.
A paycheck.
Oh, I also love the, like, what would you consider one of your biggest weaknesses? Girl, don't come at me like that. We just met.
None.
You'll learn what my biggest weakness is when you hire me.
Right. I chew too loud.
Right. They always say to spin it. It'd be like, my biggest weakness is that I'm too organized. Yeah. I'm too prompt.
Oh, shit.
I love Post-its. Anyway, sorry, we got off. Past traumas are coming up for Noah and I right now. So then she says to him, you know what I think is strange? That I've been here for 5 months. And every time I look at the section for jobs, this is listed again and again.
Right.
And again.
So it's interesting because nobody's taken the job, but he's acting like, well, why do you want this so like, highbrow job? This is such a great opportunity, but you're throwing your life away. And she's like, wait a second. Like, so nobody else has gotten this job though? What's the catch? Because he asked her, what's the catch? And then she's like, I got one for you. I'm going to spin this just like I was taught in an interview. What's the catch with you?
Throw it right back at him.
Right.
Get it, Dani.
Because he's talking about the kids, just like in The Turn of the Screw. And he's like, these kids are exceptional. They're brilliant. But also, I got a feeling that like he's not involved.
No.
Like there's this weird moment where, he's like, they're great, whatever, but you need to take care of them. And it's like, well, why? It's so weird to me. Like, why aren't you taking care of the kids?
Yeah, he wants like nothing to do with them. He wants to be as far removed from them as possible.
And then we get the first hint that there was somebody prior to her. Yeah, and then she had died on the grounds.
Whoopsie.
Who says that in an interview?
He don't give a shit.
Right.
Yeah.
And then interview ends. She goes to a bar to look for more jobs because she's like, I know I didn't get it.
She gets a pint at the pub.
Yeah. And then Mr. Wingrave comes in, also get a pint at the pub. And she's like, you know what? I'm going to get this job. She goes up there, talks to him more. And this probably brings me to a point. I wish more job interviews were like this. I wish it wasn't so like strictly like it should be professional, but more of like, you should get to know this person because he hired her after he like had a few drinks with her.
Right. Yeah. And she kind of like, she saw him. She was a little aggravated from the interview. She was looking through the, job section of the newspaper again. And she was also a little drunk.
Right.
So she had that wall of fear kind of broken down and she was able to talk to him. And then they kind of get into it a little bit. And then the next thing we see is her on a payphone at her hostel in London talking to someone who at the end of the conversation we learned is her mom.
Right. And she pretty much tells her like she insinuates that she's running from something.
Right.
And she's like, I'm not running. But then we also see that she covers up all her mirrors. Because the first moment, like the first instance where you see her right before she goes to the interview, that car passes by and you see a ghost in the reflection. And then again, when after she gets off the phone and she's packing up to leave and she takes all the stuff off the mirrors and she's leaving and she's about to close the door. She looks at the mirror and then that ghost is there again. The like man or big giant boy with like head-like eyes.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah. So there's in Sailor Moon. It always comes back to Sailor Moon. In Sailor Moon, in I believe it's Super S. There is a guy named Professor Tomoe, and he's like a mad scientist guy, and he has glasses. And whenever you see him, like, he's just a dark shadow, but his glasses are white.
Oh, so it's him.
It's him.
It's him.
Yeah.
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 I would run from that too.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
it's Sailor Saturn's dad.
Right.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. So we get that like first like ghost moment, and he comes back a couple of times.
Yeah, and Mike Flanagan said that the ghost, like the hidden ghost, is more deliberate in this one.
Right.
Like in the first series, because this isn't technically a second season, but it's another series and it's anthology. And he said that the ghosts were just kind of just sprinkled throughout. And he's like, oh, that would be creepy if somebody was under the stairs or something. Right. But now in this season, it's very much more deliberate. And I think that really goes with the turn of the screw story.
Yeah.
Because the ghosts seem to just be around, you know, or at least supposedly supposed to be around.
They were there.
Right. And then the next moment. So now we're getting introduced to cast members or characters that weren't in Turn of the Screw.
Correct.
So she gets picked up by Owen.
Yes.
Which is a new character introduced into this story.
Who has such gorgeous hair.
Right. He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's played by Raul Cohill. Is that how you would spell it?
It's Coley.
Coley?
Yeah.
Cohill? Coley?
Coley. Yeah.
Cooley.
And he's awesome. So he's actually British.
Right.
So he's really British. And he's the cook at the house. But
also the chauffeur?
Also the driver. Like he'll go pick people up. So he picks her up in London and he takes her out to the countryside. And as they're getting there, she's kind of learning things about him and about the house. And then she's like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. She's like, can you just drop me off here and I'll walk the rest of the way?
Right. And he is very much like that. So we live in New York and we know New York is pretty and we go to the city and stuff like that. But he has very much that same thing that like tourists have. So if people come and visit from out of town, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is beautiful. And it's like, I guess. It's stinky. It's dirty. Like there's too many people.
Yeah. We're like the spoiled New Yorker for sure.
Right. And he has that feeling because she's like, this is beautiful. It's so beautiful. And he's like, I lived here my whole life. I guess it's okay.
It's green.
Right. But then she has that weird moment where she's like, can you drop me off like 10 miles from the house? I'm just going to walk from here.
Go for a little hike.
And she has a hiking backpack. So she planned it.
She was ready.
Right.
She was ready for this adventure.
Right.
And so as she's walking, well, she just manages to just stumble in the right direction.
Right. I mean, it is a big manor.
I mean, like, I guess. But, like, how did she end up by the lake? Anyway. So she's walking, and then the first well, I guess not the first. She met Owen. So the first child she sees is Flora by the lake singing.
Yes.
And she says, that was a lovely song you sang. Flora's like, what song?
Yeah. Okay. Heard you singing, girl.
Not on tonight, Flora.
Right. And
not
so
tonight.
She's super sweet, of course. And she's very like the kids in this. And I know we'll get more into it. And I'm assuming it's going to be more apparent later on. But the kids are they seem too old. They seem older than they're acting because she's very polite and she's very like, oh, you must be this person. You must be this. Let me go show you and take you on a tour. And it's like, okay, I don't know what like 7-year-old would do that, even a British one from the British countryside. And then you see her playing with this little talisman.
This little like stick doll.
Yeah. And she was like, oh, let's go to the house. Oh, but wait. And then she puts the talisman in front of the lake and then they go. And then she meets Miles and Mrs. Gross.
Yay, Mrs. Gross.
Yeah.
Just side note. So Amelie B. Smith, who plays Flora, voiced Peppa Pig.
No
way. She has cred.
What?
She has British street cred.
It's amazing.
Which is amazing. Oh, what is the phrase that Flora says throughout the whole time? Like it's
perfectly splendid.
It's perfectly splendid. We do have that moment though before they leave the lake where Dani is like, let's go look at the lake. And she's like, oh, no.
Right.
Absolutely not. You mustn't go there. Let's leave the lake.
Right. But you were there. Child.
Telling you what to do.
She tells her it's not a lake. She's like, it's just a dirty old pond. It's like, well, why are you playing with your hair sticks?
Rude.
A dirty old pond.
Rude. So I'm sorry, I had that segue. But so she meets Mrs. Gross and she meets Miles, and they're by are they by a fire?
They're at a well.
Oh, the well.
An interesting thing about this, and there's these moments in this story where it doesn't seem like the characters are all there. So Miles and Flora are perfectly like way too polite and way too cordial and acting not their age. And Miles is like, oh, nice to meet you. And like kisses her hand. You must be blah, blah, blah.
So
and Mrs. Gross does not acknowledge it. And then when Miles is like, this is Mrs. Gross, then she kind of like snaps out because she was looking down into the well and she snaps out of it. And then she's like, oh, I'm sorry. I was somewhere else. And it's like, that's very odd. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's odd. And it reminds me of the narrator looking into the water and having all the water stuff. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's very weird. I feel like water is going to play a huge part in this.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see, because in the Turn of the Screw, the novella, Douglas, who's the one who gets the manuscript, is like, well, this was my sister's governess, and she wrote this down, and this is how I got the story. We do not know how the narrator is connected to Bly Manor.
Mm-hmm.
We just
is
know that
she
she
Flora?
Right.
Like, who knows?
Right.
Right.
So that's kind of exciting to see what that'll end up being.
Mm-hmm.
So they go into the house, and
that's when we get the perfectly splendid tour.
Everything's perfectly splendid. It's perfectly splendid.
I took it as like, I saw all these memes and all these people making fun of it. And there was this really funny thing of like, I even posted about it. It was like Bly Manor spoilers without context. And it was like even just a gif of somebody saying splendid. I feel like Flora did this because it's like, you know, when a little kid learns like a new exciting word.
Yeah.
And they just have to use it every chance they get. And
absolutely.
That's exactly what she did.
Yeah. And
she said it 6 times.
Yeah. And what's funny, though, is that like the rest of them, like especially Miles, her older brother, is like, oh, we get it. It's perfectly splendid.
Right. So they're all in on it.
Yeah,
they're like, she won't shut up.
She won't stop.
Yeah.
So that's her giving her a tour. We get to like, I want to call it the West Wing, but that's what it's called.
I think that is what it's called.
Oh, it's Beauty and the Beast. It's also the West Wing.
Yeah, the West Wing, never go into any West Wings in any manors, apparently. No castles, manors, houses, nothing.
Don't do it. So they bring Dani to her room and they drop her off and she's like, okay, I'm going to get settled. And then
they also tell her, don't go into the West Wing.
Don't do it.
Right.
And there's like sheets draped over everything, you know, that perfect, creepy, do not enter aesthetic.
Right. Because they tell her that was their parents' wing. Flora and Miles' parents' wing. The parents are dead. So don't go in there. Which, why keep everything and have it all covered? That's really weird. 1, waste of space, and you're not getting your money's worth. And 2, creepy.
Time to remodel.
Right. Yeah. Come on.
Let's get some new furniture in. Knock down a wall or 2.
And you get this moment with Dani when they bring her into the room, and she's like floored. She's like elated because this is a beautiful space.
Right.
It looks like a normal bedroom to us, but you can tell that she's like, this is what she needed. She needed some type of like anchor or structure and something that she can call her own, or just not a hostel, maybe.
Right, exactly. Like, because obviously when you see the hospital, it's beige, it's crappy, and then she gets here and it's magnificent.
Has those like $2 Walmart mirrors like on the wall.
Yeah, exactly. The ones that fall apart when you touch them. Right. They might just be tinfoil in a frame. Mm-hmm. So she goes to get settled. They leave her. And then
she's getting undressed because she's getting settled.
Thank you. And then we see a little peeky peek, like the view is us viewing her getting changed. And then it turns out that Sir Miles was being a total creeper, disgusting little turd, and was watching her get changed.
Yeah, and she catches him and she's like, oh, God. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt? It's like, yes, you creep. He has the perfect aesthetic of the creepy kid.
Yeah.
In movies, because he looks like the boy. He looks like Damien from The Omen. Like,
and he's always like perfectly dressed and very well mannered.
Has that like dead-eyed face.
Except he's watching you get changed.
Right.
So he's disgusting.
Right. Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, I just wanted to give you a gift. And he gives her this like butterfly beret.
Yeah. Or like hair clip thing.
And so she's like, thanks, but don't ever do that. And maybe knock next time. And then he leaves and she locks him out. Mm-hmm. And something to mention is that we learned that Dani was a teacher for like 6 years or something like that.
Yeah. She like managed 25 kids. And that was our big pitch to Wingrave.
Yeah.
That like, look, I can handle 2 kids if I can handle 25. But there's a moment when she's talking about it where it seems like something happened.
Yeah.
Like something happened with her or the kids or something, like maybe she couldn't handle it.
Well, she says like it's almost like she wanted to be able to save 26 kids in her class.
Right.
And she couldn't handle that. It's too many kids. But to save and change and affect 2 kids, that I could do. Mm-hmm. So did something happen with one of her students or something like that? Is that what she's running from?
That, just as like a prediction, and I'm just going to put that out there.
Prediction!
That ghost she keeps seeing with the eyes that look like headlights. Maybe a bus full of kids. I don't know. I feel like it's going to get real dark at some point. She is obviously running from something. And I think her mom said that for a reason. And she's trying to be like, no, I'm not. I'm fine. I'm just trying to like see the world.
Yeah.
Liar.
But really something happened.
Liar.
Yeah.
Liar, Dani.
Liar, Manor on fire.
No.
Maybe.
Not with Mrs.
Prediction!
Not with Mrs. Gross.
No, Mrs. Grouse. So she goes out to dinner. Owen's serving them, and then he pieces out. And she's like, where's Owen going? And he's like...
Has to take care of his mom.
Has to take care of his mom.
Mm-hmm.
And like, apparently it takes up more and more of his time. He was once traveling the world. He came back to take care of his mom. We also have this thing where she keeps saying, like, I haven't gotten a handle on tea yet.
Right, she can't make tea,
She can't make tea.
Mm-hmm.
And, okay, so again, back to the accents. I'm like, is she from the Midwest? Is she from the South? Because... she keeps sort of having this twang sometimes. There was
a moment when she was talking to Wingrave about tea, because he offered her tea as well. And she's like, I haven't gotten the hang of it. I'm used to tea by the pitcher.
Right.
So I'm like, she is from the Midwest or South, because I grew up in Texas quite a bit, and we had all our tea in pitchers. And when she makes tea for the people at Bly Manor, she dumps a fuck ton of sugar in there. I'm like, girl, you're making sweet tea and it's hot.
Right.
It's not even iced.
Yeah. And so she pours it all for them, and like they like all sort of take a polite sip, and then they're like, this is terrible. And Miles is like, I'll give you pointers, baby. And she's like, thanks. Yeah. And then Mrs. Gross is like, oh, well, I'm going to leave now.
Yeah, she doesn't eat at all. And it's really weird, because she's like, wait, you're not going to eat? And she's like, yeah, I'll eat it later.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's so odd.
So bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's time for the kids to go to bed.
She's given, what's her face? Flora a bath.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she's giving Flora a bath, and she keeps talking to Flora, but then Flora shifts her eyes to like next to Dani.
Like past her. She's looking past her, and she sees the hair clip in her hair.
And she's like, who gave that to you?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, Miles gave it to me. And he's like, he shouldn't have. She's like, sorry. And then she looks past her again, and she like sort of nods. And then she goes, no, you could keep it.
Right. So she's talking to somebody.
Yeah. So there's someone there.
Probably the owner of the clip, because she tells her that doesn't belong to you. You can't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's poor Dani.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, I was just trying to like use the gift that this creepy peepee Tommy guy gave me.
We had a rough start, Miles and I. I'm trying to make good, and it's still going badly.
Mm-hmm.
So then she's going to put them in bed. And so when Flora gets out of the bath, she's like, can I go play with my dolls? And she's like, yeah, for 15 minutes. So she goes to put Miles to bed. Miles is being a real creeper.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes to put Flora to bed, and Flora's putting all of her dollies to bed. And she has this one doll that sort of looks like Dani. And Dani's like, oh, is that me? And she's like, it's all silly. You're you. And then she like puts her to bed. And then she's like cleaning up things in the room. And there's another doll that's underneath Flora's dresser.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, leave that there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, child. But a creepy thing, like when she's playing with the dolls, like as she's about to go to bed and she's playing with it, each room with the person in it has this terrifying other doll that looks like Flora made it.
Yes.
And like, it's not okay.
And there's like a really tall, big one. There's one whose arms are like wrapped around a corner, like it's being like ripped from the room.
And then there's this one that we continuously start seeing in the background ever since we see this. It's like this like crow, like, you know, back in like the medieval times, the doctors that had the crow masks. It looks like that, but it looks like they're in like a brown paper bag. Like their whole outfit is that color. And you start seeing them in the background, like in the hedges or... You know, when she's walking down the hallway, you find out that weird thing that was in the camera the whole time was actually that ghost. Terrifying.
Yeah, so that happens that night.
Yeah.
So Flora's like, you have to promise me one thing.
Mm-hmm.
You will not get up at night and leave your room. So, of course, she can't sleep. She goes downstairs to make herself tea.
Also, Dani's like, yeah, whatever, child. I can do what I want.
Flora.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. So she goes downstairs, she makes herself tea. And that's what's really cool, is that as we see her walking down the hall back to bed, there's this angle where there's like the camera is being obstructed by something.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see that it's the beak, and the figure turns to look at her.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
Yeah. And she hears something when she's doing the tea, and she gets distracted. She goes over there, and then the kettle starts going off, and she's like, oh my God, that's even scarier.
I'm screaming. Everyone's going to wake up. Flora's going to yell at me.
Right. And then she goes to bed. Next day, they're on their little walk. They're just having a little walk, and, you know, Miles goes and like, I found something, and she's trying to talk to Flora or whatever, and like ignoring Miles, and he's like, look guys, and it's a spider. Scares Flora, and Dani's like, bruh, I worked with how many kids, they all try to scare me. You can't scare me.
Watch me take the spider from you.
Right. But then this weird thing happens where she was like, oh, tricks what you did at school, because she knows that he got out of school.
Right.
And he knows this. So this is another difference from the book, is that he knows at the beginning that he ain't going back to school, but we don't know why in the show yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they're walking back to the manor, she sees PQ up on that balcony. We only know it's PQ because we know the actor that's playing Peter Quinn.
Yeah.
But she sees him up in the balcony in the West Wing.
But again, this is a nod to the book, which I effing loved. Because if you remember in the first episode of this season, I talked about the creepy moment when she sees him on the balcony and all the sound around her goes silent. And they did that.
Yeah, they did that in the show.
Oh,
yeah, and then
so good.
So she's there. It starts getting really silent because you hear birds prior to that, and then it gets really silent. And then as she like puts her hand up to wave, the sound starts coming back. So it's very odd. Like I'm curious to see how they interpret that in the show going forward. So then they all sit down for dinner. I'm assuming Owen's there cooking again. Miss Gross is there, and she asks. She's like, "Hey, was there like a repairman or somebody here?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "No, what are you talking about? There was somebody up on the balcony," or whatever fancy word they called it. I can't remember the fancy word. And they're like, "No, but you can go check it out if you want." And then we get introduced to Jamie.
Right, which is really weird. So they kind of trick you, right, as a viewer, because Jamie walks into the kitchen, makes like this very precise arc to go wash her hands, and nobody acknowledges her. It's just like she just weaves within them. And for a moment, I was like, is this another ghost? Like, what's happening? But then she sits down, she interacts with them. We learn that Jamie is the gardener.
Right. And it's interesting because there's narration going on during this. And they're like, I guess everybody thinks that we already met already. So that's why nobody's acknowledging this person coming into the room. But off the bat, I love Jamie. Like, I like her attitude. I like how she's this like give no fucks type of person. She's like, I garden. I'm done. Don't trust anybody here.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's kind of like Mrs. Gross and Owen. Like Mrs. Gross is like very like proper caretaker. Owen is kind of just like a regular dude. Like Jamie feels like a punk sort of Londoner person. You know what I mean? She's got like overalls on. She's really cool. So that was interesting that they brought her in.
Yeah.
And then after that, Dani decides, well, I'm going to go see what's popping in the West Wing. So like, what's up in his club? So she gets there, she goes into the room, and we kind of decided that it's the master bedroom. It's the parents' bedroom that she walks into.
Right. Very oddly shaped. Not as extravagant as I would have thought, but everything's covered up in a sheet.
True. So
every time I see places covered up like that, it always reminds me of Jumanji. When he comes back after being older and in his house, everything's covered in those white sheets.
Yeah.
Always reminds me of that. I don't know why.
Such a good movie.
Just figured I'd give a name drop to.
Well, whenever there's a mansion, you know what I mean? You just throw sheets on it if it's been abandoned. You know what I mean? It doesn't get sold off or anything. You just throw sheets on it. It's that aesthetic.
She goes out to the balcony where she saw PQ.
Yeah.
Peter Quinn. And she sees another one of little Flora's hair talismans.
Yeah.
So Flora was there. She had to have been there. And she sees I guess they have a church.
There's like a chapel.
A chapel on the grounds. Did they normally do that?
I don't know. But it made me think that scene where they're walking to church in The Turn of the Screw, if that's the chapel, like if the chapel was just on the grounds or something.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, they walked everywhere then though. So it's
that's true.
How far was it really?
Gonna get in their car.
Right. Right.
So she sees that there's like a flickering light in one of the windows, and she decides to go walk down there to see who's in there. And when she walks in, she sees Mrs. Gross praying at the candles.
And she has like 5, maybe 6 4.
I think there's 4.
4. Okay. Yeah. 4 to 6.
Because I think that the 4. So as the viewer, if you haven't read The Turn of the Screw, right? As the viewer, we only know that the 2 parents are dead and Miss Jessel is dead. We don't know who the 4th one is.
Which is probably PQ.
Which is probably PP. Okay. I don't know words. It's okay.
Probably PP.
PP. Right. This is probably PP.
Right.
So then we get this very big monologue from Mrs. Gross. Can I also just say that the woman who plays Mrs. Gross is gorgeous, and she's wearing this like amazing royal violet turtleneck. It just
Tia Miller.
Yeah,
amazing.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, she just Like everything about her, her earrings, the way she looks. I'm like, get it. Yes, I believe you. Yes.
So she has like this like very, like, although she's saying it out loud, it's very internalized, this monologue about the history of the children and what they've seen at the house.
Yeah, that she feels bad for them for what she went through with their parents, and then to see what happened after that. And we get the hint that it's about Miss Jessel.
Well, she tells us, right? She tells us that Flora found Miss Jessel face down in the lake.
Yeah, so Flora's the one that found her.
Yeah.
So that's upsetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she also explains that the talismans, she calls it Flora's little game of the talismans. She puts them there to protect us. So it's, by the lake where apparently now we know that Miss Jessel died. And then in the balcony where that ghost was just watching Dani. So we're seeing these little things all over the house.
Yeah, the next scene we get is she goes to tuck the kids in.
Yeah. And
she has the talisman that she took from the balcony. And she says this really sweet thing. And we start seeing that she's starting to care for the kids, that especially Flora. Like, she's really trying to take her under her wing and like really want her to like her, or vice versa. And so she takes the talisman and she said, it's really nice that you want to protect everybody, but don't forget to protect yourself first. And she gives her the talisman and Flora doesn't say anything. Yeah. She's like, oh, that was sweet, whatever. And then fucking Miles comes in.
Yeah.
And he's like, what did he say? He's like, I need the...
Well, so as she's walking, the doll that was underneath Flora's dresser is now basically standing in the middle of the rug at the foot of Flora's bed. And as Dani is walking, she kicks it, she picks it up, and then Flora sits up.
Yeah.
And then Miles walks in and he's like, hey, I need an electric fan from Flora's closet because I need it to sleep.
You're like 13. Go get it yourself.
Miles. This kid is the worst.
He's so bad.
He's so bad. Like, the actor is good, but the character is just, you hate him.
Yeah.
You hate him. Oh, and he keeps calling her Dani. And she's like, I'm pretty sure Mrs. Gross told you to call me Miss Clayton.
And he's like, no.
He's like, oh, Dani.
Yeah.
You're so silly. So he asks for this fan.
She goes in there looking for it.
First of all, walk-in closet.
Yeah, for a 7-year-old. And she's like, well, where is it? And he's like, I think like way in the back under some clothes. As the viewer, you're like, they're going to do something.
Don't do it.
Flora and Miles are standing at the door. And as soon as she goes to the far back, Miles slams the door and locks it.
Yeah. And they like give each other this look before they do it. Like, okay, we gotta do this. And then she goes, she
tosses herself about in a closet, just like in Turn of the Screw.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
So while she's in the closet, she looks behind her and there's a mirror. And then we see that ghost again. And Dani's like, oh no. So she like covers it up and then even freaks out even more.
Yeah.
And then we hear Miles and Flora outside the door and they're like, we can't find the key. We can't open it. And it's like, you just have
Yeah, she's like, the key's in the door. You just locked it, you turd.
Right. And then so obviously some time passes because then Dani's like passed out on the floor.
She's like from exhaustion.
Right. And then they finally open it. And she was like, we'll talk about this tomorrow. Go to bed. I would have been much more pissed than that.
Oh, I would have been cracking them across the face, dumping cold buckets of water over them.
You like tricks? You like tricks?
Yeah, make them walk by the haunted lake. Get out of here, you little turds.
Right.
So she just had like an awful couple of hours and she goes downstairs. Well, actually, I think going down the stairs, there are these muddy footprints.
Yeah.
And so she follows them down the stairs and they lead to the front door, which is wide open. And she walks out the door and follows them.
And as the camera's following her, there's these really tall hedges, like really pointy type hedges. And in one of the hedges, you see that ghost or that person again with the beak.
Yeah.
Just very subtle, but I was like, there it is.
Yeah. Noah is on Ghost Watch all the time with this.
But I keep mistaking things. I'm like, that's a ghost. Wait, no. That's a door. That's a door.
Yeah. I'm like, where? Oh, I keep missing it. So as she comes out of the door, the camera pans around her and then up. And each of the children are standing in each of their windows, just staring down at her.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
So one, who went outside? Who was the muddy footprints? And what the hell is up with these kids? They're like...
They know something.
Yeah. Or, I don't know. Or are they doing anything? Who knows?
Yeah. So I think the question is like, I think it's more than a prank, right? That they lock her in the closet. Are they doing it to protect her or to hurt her?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's where the question lies. Who's giving them these orders? Who's the one that Flora was talking to in the bathtub?
Mm-hmm.
So there are spirits there. There's something that they're communicating with, that they're either trying to help Dani or hurt Dani.
Yep.
And that's where we kind of remain
that's
with
where
the big question.
Yeah, and that's where episode 1 ends.
Yeah.
With children looking down on her. Super terrifying.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I really loved this first episode. I feel it feels different to me, maybe because there's narration. In the first one, it felt like a family drama.
Mm-hmm.
Like this one feels like a ghost story.
Yeah, it's definitely more mysterious. Like there was definitely mysteries in the first one, but you don't have that that communal bond with people that went through the similar thing.
Yeah.
You have an outsider coming into something that's just not okay, but they're also carrying their own baggage. So it's interesting because we're finding out more about everybody as we go on.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, I like it.
It's definitely different than the first one, but not in a bad way. It's a different story.
Yeah, and I like that. I really like that. And I'm excited to kind of see how things are revealed and kind of, I'm not looking for jump scares necessarily, because I even think just having those shapes in the background is spooky enough.
Well, also having Miles there is terrifying enough. Like, get him out.
He's just a demon child. He's just a demon.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's episode 1, The Great Good Place. So that's our first bite of The Haunting of Bly Manor.
And we have a special segment
this time around.
Yeah, because we couldn't do like Edwards or Mrs. Gross's glossary during this, even though probably we could have just done Splendid and it would have been fine.
Right.
So we decided with visual stuff like this that we would talk about creepy kids.
Creepy kids.
Creepy kids. So the creepy kids that I wanted to talk about, which I think is so iconic, especially during this time, is the Grady twins. Do you know who they are?
No.
From The Shining?
Oh, the girls in the hallway?
Yeah.
What?
So paddling around Hotel Overlook on his tricycle, a perfectly executed corner drift puts Dani in the presence of the ghostly Grady twins. Mm-hmm. And they say, "Hello, Dani, come play with us." As they like sing in their British accents, not okay. Then there's like flashbacks of like blood-filled axe-murdered bodies flickering and all of that. And then like forever and ever and ever. Terrifying. I remember watching that when I was younger and even reading the books. Like they're terrifying in the books, but it was terrifying. They look scary. And what are they doing?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Poor Dani.
There's just something about creepy kids that make a story much more scary.
Not just one, but two. Turn that screw.
Identical.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. Those are the ones that I wanted to shine a little light on from The Shining.
Ooh, wordplay.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I like them a lot. Yeah.
So that was our first installment of Creepy Kids.
See you next time.
Bye. Thanks for listening to A Bite Of. Artwork and editing by our own Noah. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Instagram at A Bite Of Pod and on Facebook at A Bite Of. If you have questions, recommendations, or just want to say hi, you can email us at abiteofpod@gmail.com. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Please be sure to rate and review to spread the word. Hope you join us next time on A Bite Of. Bye.